Hello, I'm Kads, and welcome to today's video. So today we're going to be going over my fusion plan for getting Kassandra, the latest fusion in the game, and the first champion in the brand new Argonites faction, the 16th faction in the game. I was going to say the last faction in the game, but Plarium has stated that they do not plan to stop the faction at 16, so we'll have a whole new league to look forward to in, I don't know, maybe 3 years from now. But anyways, yes, we have the new faction, and the first and only champion for the time being is Kassandra, the current fusion champion. So let's talk through her kit and talk about whether or not she's worth going for on your account. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that, of course, she is part of the collaboration between Raid and Assassin's Creed. And what I do like is that they kind of added the IP to the left of the champions now that are associated with their respective ones. So it's a lot more obvious if a champion is associated with a certain IP and what IP they're associated with. So yeah, in this case, Assassin's Creed. Now, I don't know about you guys, and you can let me know this in the comment section down below, but I am what I would consider a fan adjacent to Assassin's Creed. And that's just a fancy way of saying that I've been a fan of the concept of Assassin's Creed for many, many years, despite not actually having played all that many of the titles. If I can digress for a bit here, I was first introduced to it when my college roommates, who are still some of my best friends nowadays, they were playing like Assassin's Creed 3 at the time, and I watched them, when we were just hanging out in our dorm room. I would watch them play, and I was always kind of intrigued by the story and whatnot. I watched them play Black Flag as well when that came out, a little bit of Unity, and that kind of, that was just part of my overall college experiences, kind of hanging with my friends as they were playing the games. I didn't have an Xbox at the time, my friends did, and so they were actively playing them, and that's why I wasn't necessarily playing with them. And then down the line, because I was, again, a fan adjacent of the franchise, I eventually went back and purchased, I think from like a Humble Bundle or something like that, but I went back and purchased like, Assassin's Creed 2 and Brotherhood, Revelations, Assassin's Creed 3, just kind of getting some good deals. And for me, I was more interested in the kind of the Desmond arc, but obviously the Ezio arc as well. And I didn't play Assassin's Creed 1. I was told not to by genuine fans. So I like watched a playthrough online just to get the story of it, so I understood that going into Assassin's Creed 2 and beyond. But so I have the, the Desmond arc games minus AC1. And to date, I've technically only played Assassin's Creed 2 and Brotherhood. I've not played Revelations all the way through, and I've not played Assassin's Creed 3 personally myself. And then anything beyond that, I didn't really look into, just because I was more invested in the combination of the real world and the past world, so to speak. And it seems like, Ubisoft kind of pivoted in more recent, or definitely pivoted in the more recent titles to just focusing on the past world, which to me is a little bit of a bummer, but I understand that probably that's what majority of the audience has wanted. They kind of want to just go back, and explore Egypt, or explore Persia, or explore wherever the Viking one was, stuff like that. So I'm probably the outlier, and so it is what it is. I guess feudal Japan is the most recent one, Assassin's Creed Shadows. But anyways, long story short, I am definitely a fan adjacent of the franchise. I'm familiar with it. I know a decent amount of the assassins by name and whatnot, and so I'm kind of keen to get all of them just for the sake of getting all of them. I guess comparing this to like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, where I was like a much less of a fan of that than I am of Assassin's Creed, so I'm definitely more compelled to try and collect all 5 of the assassins. So with that said, I'm definitely more incentivized to go for Kassandra. Of course, I go for every single fusion anyways nowadays, so it doesn't really matter good or bad. If they're bad, I just throw them in the vault, and they just they become useful if they ever become useful, or not. And yeah, so nothing really changes, but nonetheless, slightly more incentivized to make sure I don't mess this one up or something like that. But anyways, let's talk about whether you should get her on your account, regardless of whether or not you're a fan of Assassin's Creed. So she is a Magic Affinity legendary attack-based champion, and yeah, she's relatively speaking immortal, which is kind of an interesting concept to the game. I'm not going to talk about the other assassins. I think there are plenty of other content creators who have gone over their kits and whatnot, and probably coming up soon, or at least over the next few days, we'll see more showcases on those other assassins in action. But yeah, Kassandra, let's start off with her A1. It is a triple hitter, but it can become a sextuple hitter if she is low on health, so 50% or less, which is kind of extreme. I guess it's like a Brachus attack, except it's on an A1, which is kind of ridiculous. Each and every hit will steal 7.5% of the enemy's turn meter, so 22.5 for the triple hitter, or 45% for the sextuple hitter, which could be a ridiculous amount of turn meter boosting and or stealing from the enemies. And of course, this effect cannot be resisted if the champion is under a perfect veil, kind of leaning into the assassin buff. If you can't see them, they're a lot more powerful or potent. On the A2, It's a single target attack, but before attacking, it will place decreased defense and HP burn on the target for 3 turns, which is cool on a 3-turn cooldown. You know, it'd be nicer if this was AoE, of course. AoE decreased defense would be a excellent start to a new faction, but nonetheless, it is a single target. And yeah, once again, can't be resisted if she's under a veil. And then you get an AoE stun if the damage dealt by the skill is more than 50% of the target's max HP. So this is kind of a weird caveat here because, you know, in the stone skin meta or in the polymorph meta and the Wand of Submission meta, it's a little bit dangerous to try to go for CC. And you know, if they're under stone skin, you're not going to land, you're not going to be able to do enough damage with this. And then if they're not under stone skin, then you risk the chance of stunning yourself with the Wand of Submission. So it's a little bit odd in PvP. And then in PvE, enemies are going to be relatively tanky as you kind of get to harder and harder content. So it's going to be less likely that you'll rely on this ability to actually be able to be a form of CC. But nonetheless, if you can pull it off, once again, cannot be resisted if she's under a veil. You can get an AoE stun. And then the A3 is where her pseudo immortality comes into play. So she cleanses herself, she heals herself by 50%, she boosts her turn meter by 50%, she places increased attack, shatter, and increased speed on herself for 2 turns. This is on a 4-turn cooldown when booked. And for those who don't know, shatter is a relatively new buff in the game, which just means it increases your ignored defense capabilities by 15%. So she doesn't innately have any ignored defense in her abilities, but this will grant her the plus 15%. Of course, you run her in Savage, that would be another 25%. So you can start off when she has buffed herself with 40% defense ignore. Now, the passive effect, i.e. her immortality, is that it will prevent this champion's death and keep them alive on 1 HP if they are under all 3 of these buffs. It has to be all 3. It's an and, it's not an or. So she has to be under increased attack, shatter, and increased speed, i.e. she needs to buff herself with this ability. And then she literally cannot die for any reason. So poisons, burns, multi-hits, doesn't really matter. She will stay alive as long as she is under these 3 buffs. Of course, this can be very, very easily countered by decreased buff duration. So like Amarius would just eat through her easily. And just any old-fashioned buff strip will work as well. You can buff strip and then she would just die right afterwards. So she's not... It's not uncounterably immortal, but nonetheless, if you don't do anything about it, she will just stay alive. But you obviously, you know, when this is on a 4-turn cooldown, but she also boosts her turn meter by 50%, meaning she's going to go a lot sooner than if she just put it on and waited. And so she'll run through the buffs relatively quickly, and then you still have those 2 dead turns in between where you can't buff up, and therefore you are also vulnerable. So it's not really that broken of an ability, but I guess if you timed it perfectly, it could be a little bit of a menace, and she could finish off the team based on who's left. But at the same time, all of her abilities are single target, so I don't know. It's not the best synergy in my opinion, but it is a cool concept, I guess, in her kit. One of her passives, or I guess the passive that is commonly shared across all of the assassins, everything is permitted. Whenever an enemy's HP drops below 25% after receiving damage from any assassin, they will receive additional bonus damage proportional to this champion's attack. I think 4 out of the 5 assassins are attack based, and one of them is defense based, and in his passive just says based on his defense. But essentially, they all have the same thing. If any assassin brings you low and you're running multiple assassins on the same team, you're basically dead, is what that means, because your HP is relatively low and you're going to build most of them like nukers, so high attack and or high defense, and thus if they all attack you or multiple attack you at the same time or with the bonus damage, you're basically going to die because it ignores 100% defense. Granted, it can't be critical, so it's not going to be some crazy Siegfried type thing, but nonetheless, it's still going to do a decent amount of damage, especially if you're already low. And then her actual passive that's unique to her is that whenever this champion attacks an enemy, increases her attack equal to 50% of the target's defense, and then increases enemy attack, when an enemy attacks her, then she increases her defense by 50% of the defender or the attacker's attack. So she gets a little bit tankier when hit, especially, synergizes well with the period of time where she can't die. And then she also just gets stronger. Her own attacks get stronger based on the enemy's defense. So I guess if you attack a tank, then she'll get even more attack. Last but not least, she does have a aura for speed in all battles by 19%. So when it comes to, overall kit, I think she's kind of meh, maybe like B tier at best. Single target is not the strongest thing unless there's something kind of special going on. Again, the sextuple hitter is kind of interesting. But at the same time, it's kind of contrasted by her relatively low base stats. HP is kind of a healthy amount, but her attack for an attack-based nuker, especially legendary, being 1300, that's kind of like epic territory, unfortunately. Her defense is higher than normal, though, I'll give her that. But yeah, she's probably not going to hit ridiculously hard. But then again, if you hit someone 6 times, does it really matter if you hit that hard? It's kind of hard to say. But we don't know the multipliers just yet exactly. And obviously the shatter buff can improve her numbers drastically because you're ignoring some defense. So kind of the jury's still out there. Based on the showcases that I've seen, it's kind of hard to show her at her full potential because of course this is a new faction. You literally do not have accessories for her unless you've already been farming Spider. You can't build her in Stone Skin because we haven't had a Hydra reset since she's been in the game. Therefore you literally cannot have Stone Skin accessories for the Argonites. But even if you were, you'd have to be really lucky to get the first round of them to go into the faction. So you can't really put her in like an endgame build, which would be Stone Skin Savage, and kind of see what she can actually do PvP. So I think the showcases of her potential are somewhat limited, at least for the first couple of months that the new faction is in the game. So I think we're gonna have to put a pin in whether or not she's super good for a while, just because we can't really build her appropriately to showcase what she could actually do. But regardless, I will say that on paper it does feel like her kit is relatively underwhelming. We talked about ways to counter her immortality. We talked about her being a single target, and it might be hard, especially in PvP, to get the AoE stun to be useful, not to get it to happen, just to get it to be useful, because again, you might stun yourself with the wand of submission, you could get polymorphed and stuff like that. And most notably, I forgot to mention, she does not have a way to perfect veil herself. So if you're running her as your only assassin on the team, then you're going to need accuracy in the kit to do any and all of the things that she does, or you're going to need someone on the team who can veil her, either another assassin or like a duchess or something like that, who can veil her such that her abilities cannot be resisted. So she's not really a self-sustaining champion aside from just keeping herself, relatively speaking, immortal. So I guess I'm not really doing that great of a job of selling her to you, but I guess that's not really my job, is it? It's kind of up to you to decide whether or not she's worth it. But I will say that, it's a new faction. The Faction Crypt will open for normal and hard mode eventually, and so it would be nice to just bank a legendary, even if she's not the most useful. It could be nice to just have one on your account, just in case the rest of the legendaries are harder to come by, or you don't get any of them. The epics are a little bit underwhelming at the start. Who knows how this is going to start off? It's a new faction after all. But if you have the bandwidth, I think you should just bank her, even if she's not going to be immediately useful. Just having a, relatively speaking, decent damage dealer for the faction for the Faction Crypt when it opens could be useful in the future. And then of course, in the future there might be more iterations of restrictive content, and you can't get this champion ever again after the IP collaboration ends. So I think it would behoove of you, if you can, to just bank her even if she's not immediately useful, but that is up to you, of course, to decide for yourself. So now, as usual, let's hop over to the spreadsheet, which will be linked in the description box down below, to talk a little bit more about the Fusion calendar itself. But I do want to mention here that in the Fusion tab, you can see that this is a hybrid style Fusion, meaning that each of the events you participate in will give you fragments, 25 or more, or 25 or 50, I guess, is usually the two breakpoints. But you'll get fragments for the epics, and then you collect those, you fuse them. So if we look at the fragment summon area, we come down here, you should be able to see, you can get up to 450 fragments total for the epic of the fusion, and then you combine, or you fuse them, you level them up, you ascend them, and then you can fuse them into the legendary itself. So hybrid style is the type of fusion in this case, and unfortunately it is the most difficult type of fusion. So just keep that in mind as well if you're still making that decision, or if you're on the fence as to whether or not you want to go for her. So now let's take a look at the Fusion plan spreadsheet. Again, this will be linked in the description box down below. In terms of the Fusion itself, it is, relatively speaking, par for the course for the most part. So we have the standard 4 dungeon split. We have 2 classic arena tournaments. We have a champion training tournament, champion chase tournament. We have 3 gear hunters events. We have 3 gear enhancement events. We have 1 champion training event, and then we have the normal summon rush. But we do also have the bonus summon rush. I think this is kind of a MLK Day type time frame. MLK Day is, of course, on Monday, but I don't think that's an internationally celebrated holiday, so I think it's just kind of in the middle of late January, so to speak. Now, despite being a relatively normal fusion, there are a couple of things to point out here that are that are somewhat unique. First thing being just the basic pinch points, what I like to call them, which are overlaps between champion training and dungeon events, or dungeon tournaments. We kind of started off a little bit with champion training overlapping with dragon and ice golem. And then we kind of end off with champion training overlapping with Spider and Fire Knight. So just keep in mind that you're going to have to apportion your energy appropriately over those time periods, because like we mentioned, this is a hybrid style fusion. And so if you miss out on fragments, you're kind of SOL when it comes to getting the fusion done, because there's not really a way to make up lost fragments unless you happen to pull one of the epics. He is magic affinity, so he could just pop out of any of the shard events along the way, as we'll talk about in a second here. But if you want to be safer, make sure you're doing all the events you plan to, otherwise you might mess up the fusion, and it's really, really hard to recover from a hybrid style fusion. The champion chase itself, the champion chase tournament, is at the start of the fusion, which is quite a bummer, because that means there is literally no way that you can have all one set of epics ready to go to fuse, or just getting air quotes free points for the champion chase. So that is a bit of a bummer. I mean, maybe there's a chance that just if you like go super hard, you can get the champion training, the dragon, classic arena, and the gear hunters. I guess you could maybe, like, if you try harded, you can get one epic, fuse it for 250 points in the champion chase. But normally when it's champion chase is nearer to the end, you can get up to like 3 epics fused for 750 points. So it's just a little bit of a bummer that it's at the start, but that's just the nature of the beginning date of the fusion. And then the other thing, of course, is the fact that we do have a bonus summon rush, combined, I will say, with the fact that the champion chase is 2x on sacred. So if you want to be like super efficient, because the champion chase offers 25 fragments, the basic summon rush offers 25 fragments, but the bonus summon rush itself offers up to 50 fragments, meaning that you can kind of mix and match between them, or just only do the bonus summon rush. If you think about just normal odds, assuming you're not super lucky, which is how I tend to think about things, you have 2,500 points for the champion chase milestone. I'm predicting that there's going to be 3,000 for the summoner, which we'll have to see what that is in the future. But regardless, that's usually in that neighborhood. But that would mean that if you get worse odds, meaning no legendaries at all whatsoever, you'd have to pull 10 sacreds to get to 2,500, and then you'd have to pull another 6 to get to the 3,000 here in the summon rush, meaning that would be up to 16 sacreds worth of shard pulling just to try and get 50 fragments. Or you could probably just go for the bonus summon rush, which historically is around these values, so 3,000 for the lower milestone for the first set of 25, and then let's say 5,500, but worst case 6,100 for the upper milestone, and that would be at worst 12 sacreds plus some mystery shards, of course. So it would be, no matter what, objectively speaking, it is cheaper in terms of overall amount of sacreds pulled to just go for the bonus summon rush. But one thing to keep in mind is that there's going to be boosted rates, or there's going to be somewhat incentives to kind of pull for these other events. So in my case, I always like to err on the side of caution, because you never know what these milestones are. You never know what events are going on. There could be a pogo thrown in here, pull one get one. There could be a really incentivizing summon rush going on in terms of progressive chance events and whatnot. So I always like to err on the side of caution, just to be a little bit more conservative. But as I mentioned earlier, for me personally, I am interested in getting all of the assassins, and so I think to start, one of the assassins is on a 10x during this 2x sacreds, so I'm a little bit more incentivized to pull. I'm also relatively fresh off of a legendary, so building up mercy in the worst case would be good for me in case there is a sacred pogo during the bonus summon rush. But you could also see on the flip side, my plan right now is probably to skip the basic summon rush, depending upon, again, what the progressive chance events are and how close I am to mercy, if at all. And then I could either opt to pull more sacreds during this and skip out on some other events, or kind of do some mix and match. So there's a lot of question marks in terms of exactly what I'm going to do for this particular, collection of shard pulling. But the tentative plan is to pull for the champion chase, potentially skip the basic summon rush, and then partially do the bonus summon rush, depending upon what the layout of the events are. And since we're over here on the right hand side, for those of you who aren't familiar with this layout of the spreadsheet, we have all of the milestones for each of the events and tournaments laid out here. Anything marked with an asterisk is a predicted amount based off historical precedent, and anything that does not have that is just the actual number from the game itself once the events and tournaments go live. And then anything marked or anything in parentheses is just the amount of resources that I happen to use for those particular events. So if we look a little bit in the past, you can see like Cross, I pulled 40 promos because there was a 2x promos for Black Friday. I pulled voids and mystery shards for the summon rush. This is how much silver I spent on each of the gear enhancement events, so on and so forth. And this spreadsheet goes all the way back to Pytheon, so I think that is 2023-ish. So there's a lot of fusions, a lot of data. So if you really want to go back and look at all of the milestones for previous events and see if they've been increasing them over the years, which is somewhat true, but also somewhat untrue, you could do that in the spreadsheet here. The last thing to mention on this tab is what I consider to be my energy plan. This is just this is not a prescription of what you should do for your energy on a daily basis, but this is how I just plan to use my energy. So if you want to use that as a guideline, you definitely can. But yeah, so I definitely like to prioritize champion training when it's live, but I also want to focus on the dungeon tournaments as appropriate. And then because this is a hybrid style fusion, you do have to worry about ascending. If we flip over to the fusion potion calculator tab, we can see we have the requirements for Kassandra herself, which is just that you have 4 magic epics. So relatively painless, depending upon how many superiors you have. But you can, of course, farm the arcane keep at any point, but you will need 12 of those. And then you'll just need 24 of the superiors. And if we hop back over to the fusion plan, if you do need to farm the potion keeps, that calendar is also live here in the upper section of the spreadsheet. So the first day would be tomorrow. On Saturday would be the magic keep being open, and then subsequent days. So you have multiple times to farm the potion keep if you need to. But for the most part, if you're doing a little bit of hard mode Centranos, then you're going to be getting a lot of these bigger or superior potions. And then, of course, if you're doing Ultra Nightmare Clan Boss, you should be getting these over time as well. So that might not be as much of a concern. But in case it is, the information is there for you to react accordingly. Now, hopping back into the game itself, let's talk about some of the current events going on right now. So it's not associated with the fusion directly, but it is associated with, of course, the Assassin's Creed collaboration. We do have the Coalition event, which is just like the one for Chaos Awakes, I think, but the Tholan Falbeard time frame, the Corrosive, the Covetous time frame. But if you do a bunch of, you play the game at a relatively mediocre and or high level, depending upon what you're going for exactly, you can get a lot of points, get some rewards, and then as a community and overall player base, if we do enough points, we get enough multipliers and whatnot. These are your personal points down here, and then this is the overall points of everyone doing stuff. We can get a really, really awesome avatar frame that I definitely want for myself. So do your part. I'll definitely try to do my part, and hopefully you guys can do yours, and the Krakens can carry us, of course, all the way to the end. But yeah, from memory, I think it is really, really difficult for a normal player without spending a bunch of excess energy and resources. It's really tough to get all the way out to the maximum 20,000 points personally. But nonetheless, just keep that in the back of your head that you do want to make as much progress as possible, because of course you're just getting free stuff along the way. But anyways, focusing on the fusion related events, we do have the champion training event that is already live. Pretty standard milestone there, about 6,000 points to get the fragments. We have a Gear Hunters event. 3,700 is a pretty standard milestone. Fusion warm up. Gear enhancement starts tomorrow, and that's probably going to be pretty standard, the 4775 milestone, so no surprises there. And then for the tournaments, we already have the Dragon tournament going on. I, of course, have been grinding Dragon. That's where my focus has been, and I'm basically done. Like, I still need, another day's worth of regular energy, so to speak, so 1,500 here and about 700 points to go, which is basically later today, at least the time of this recording. After reset, I should be able to get this done a little, a day early, so to speak, and then just go ham on champion training for the next few days as much as possible before the next dungeon tournament starts. And then champion chase is already live. Relatively generous milestone, I will say. 2,500 is on the lower side. I was expecting something around 3,000 or higher, but this is relatively low, which is good. I guess it's good, better, because it's combined with the sacred charge. But again, depending upon how you want to play it, you could just skip this entirely and focus on the bonus summon rush, and then a classic arena tournament starts tomorrow. Now, I forgot to mention this at the beginning here of the current event section, but I do always like to take a snapshot of my supply count at the beginning of Fusion. So in this case, in terms of gems, let's call it 4,850 on the gems. In the silver, I know that I started off at 319 million. I've gained since the Fusion began, because of course I've been running a lot of Dragon. At the end of the Fusion, I will be making a post on my community tab page talking about the deltas in my supplies in terms of the gems and silver, but also the amount of shards that I spent overall on the Fusion. And so if you're interested in that, then stay tuned to my community tab page near the end of the Fusion to see what the deltas look like. So yeah, that's going to do it for my Fusion plan for getting Kassandra, one of the 5 assassins from the Assassin's Creed collaboration between Plarium and Assassin's Creed. Let me know in the comment section down below, what do you think of her kit? Do you agree with the kind of B tier grade? I don't think she's going to be that amazing, at least on her own, but maybe there's some, she might be better with a team of more assassins with her. It's kind of hard to say at the moment. And again, it's hard to judge the content that we've seen thus far, because a lot of people, myself included, don't really have accessories to put on her to really show her off appropriately relative to their current champions in existing factions bunches of accessories, stone skin, and otherwise. So yeah, let me know your thoughts on the champion and whether or not you're going to go for her. As always, if you did find this video helpful, then be sure to hit that like button down below. It really does help out the channel. And feel free to hit the subscribe button down below as well, if and only if you're enjoying the content overall on this channel for more content just like this one in the future. Thanks for watching and have a good one.